Welcome to A Brief History of Conspiracy.
This week, Building 7.
Right, so please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really does help us out.
Yeah, please do.
Right, so we've just got over Christmas and New Year.
Indeed.
We had a little bit of a break. We've had flu season. Someone's still suffering. He is 90% snot currently.
Second cold of the season, always fun.
7. So let's get sticking to it. This, for me, did it fall down because of the fires, or was there a demolition job? Easiest video I've done so far?
I think so.
Yeah, demolition.
Demolition.
So, done?
Yeah.
Beer?
Yeah, it's good pub.
In this episode, though, we're going to be talking about a couple of eyewitnesses. One that's actually left comments on one of our previous videos, who says he was there at the time. And we've got a couple of other eyewitnesses. We've got to talk about the NIST report. We're going to talk about potentially faked evidence on the NIST report. The Silverstein Pullet comments.
Yes.
We're going to go through it. And the one really thing at the end of the episode we're going to be talking about is how I think generally the NIST report kind of explains how they did it. But we'll get into that at the end.
Yeah, I might agree with you a little bit on that as well, yes.
So, the NIST report, basically. So, we'll go through the official version of events. Very similar, if you go back to our Twin Towers video on what they said happened there. These long floor struts, lots of nice office space.
Yep.
The fires happened, the steel twisted, they disconnected from, I'll get this right, girder on the floor 13, which is unlucky for some. Disconnected due to the warping of column 79. Column 79 was really the Achilles heel of this building. 5 stories collapsed, having this pancake effect. That weakened and then pulled down column.
Yeah.
This column 79. The internal structure then collapsed, was pulled down as that went down, and then the external structure fell in. You can see that from the pictures.
Yeah,
that is roughly what happened.
Well, you see the pinch in the middle, don't you? And then the floors drop.
You start to see the light coming through windows and things as it starts to go, and then they're pulling the building down around it. So that's the official thing. And then this building actually imploded. The towers there was an explosive force. So yeah, they're basically, my first problem with this, NIST report are basically saying that the same problem or the same design flaw is what caused this collapse. But, and I said in the Twin Towers video, I can kind of see that it's possible because it's a very different building. Obviously, it's over 100 stories. It's, well, there's a lot of weight coming down all of a sudden.
It is quite strange to have the exact
building
pancake theory collapse for a building that was only 50-something floors.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't it,
this
building
building's
7?
nothing like as big. It's still pretty big, but it's nothing like as big.
Yeah. What the Twin Towers were over 100, weren't they?
100 floors.
Yeah.
So there's not the weight that we're talking about, is there? And
Not the same sort of weight above that the towers had. No, of course.
And obviously this thing then imploded, but they're saying that was from similar. So I do have a little bit of a problem with that. So the couple of the big reasons why people believe this was pulled.
Well, the first one is, how did 2 planes powderise 3 buildings? Apart from the Twin Towers, the only other building that has been destroyed from fire that hasn't had a plane impact is World Trade Centre 7.
Yep.
In the entire recorded history of the last
World Trade Centre 5
5,000 years
burned like crazy. I mean, there's pictures of that. It is. You know, you see lots of these hotels and things that have burned over time, and when they've got fireproofed steel, and they survive. Building 5 was a lot like that. You can just see the metal ridgework, but it's a much smaller building. It was only about 12 or 15 stories or something like that.
Yeah, that Madrid skyscraper. That what was it? I think it was a raging inferno, wasn't it? For
that was
over 24 hours, maybe even pushing 30, 36. Yet the steel frame structure was still there after it had destroyed the rest of the building.
We have small collapses, even though I did have a look at that budget. There you can see sections of that steel that have given way, but you know, it's squares, isn't it? Like boxes almost. One gives way, and the rest of the structure holds. I don't understand why with Building 7 there wasn't because the big problem was this was a large atrium by the area. There's a large atrium and then this penthouse.
Yes.
And the column that collapsed was basically supporting that. So because there's this large empty space with no support structure, so that's why that column went down.
Yeah.
So why didn't just that section collapse? Why did it then pull the entire building down?
And that's where I struggle to believe what we're told as well, because you could understand the pinch and then the middle falling through with the no support there, but why then would all of the exterior that then had support columns
just get dragged in with it?
Dragged in with
like
it.
It's got no strength. Like
It's got no structural strength at all. So it is slightly less believable.
Yeah. The only other time a building, a steel framed building that has been protected with fireproofing that I could find that has collapsed following a fire was actually a 21-story building, which is again not as big as this building, and it was following an earthquake. Which again, you can see completely that an earthquake would cause other damage that could then lead to the building.
Yeah, of course.
So,
Because
that was in 1985.
Slight argument for the planes crashing into the two towers though, and the vibration from the impact at 450 miles an hour.
Potentially, I don't think
is that as severe as a severe earthquake?
No,
probably
but
not.
It would cause damage.
But it could. Yeah. So okay.
And there was damage inflicted on Building 7 from the initial impact of the Twin Towers. Debris did fall and hit it, but the NIST report says that damage was superficial. It then didn't think. But this is what started the fires that are supposedly what then took the building down. Fires that even... Though, I mean, there were significant fires. You see a lot of these pictures from a lot of YouTube videos, and this is one picture of just these 2 or 3 little fires. You can see pictures from the other side where it's just smoke billowing out the entire building. So the fires were significant, but they were going out. I mean, even the NIST report says they were going out. So
well, you can see it as well. You just have to look at the colour of the smoke that's being emitted from
because it's very
from
black,
the buildings.
dark smoke.
Black, dark smoke, stifled fire, no oxygen.
Exactly.
So, you know, and in order to get fires really hot, you need a lot of oxygen.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about the blast furnace idea in the Twin Towers. Yeah. That's basically with a stream of oxygen coming in, of airflow of the wind through the building.
It's a very specific set of scenarios that have to work in the right place, isn't it? To get that sort of heat. But it's possible to get those heat. Generally speaking, a fire, what we're talking about here, was going to be the furnishings and things like this burning. You're looking at about 600 degrees centigrade at most. The other big thing was Larry Silverstein himself, the owner of this lovely building, on the phone to the fire chief. Sort of the quote is, and I will read the quote to you, "We've had such terrible loss of life, maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it." People have jumped on that and said that like this pull it is a demolition term.
Which it is, if you look around the demolition industry. That's what that's I suppose the abbreviated term for controlled demolition. Let's pull it, or we're ready to pull it.
There's a couple of things with this stuff for me. Would he know that term?
Possibly not. But it's not a difficult term to... I mean, I knew of the term before.
Yeah, maybe. But my thinking thing is that if he decided it's just as feasible to say that they were just talking about pulling the firemen out. And that seems just as likely to me.
Maybe. I think the reason they use the phrase pull it is because they're using the controlled demolition and it does a classic, normally it pinches the middle of the building and they blow out the supports underneath, so it then goes... It's like you're almost pulling the building from the centre point. It's like you've got a string and you're pulling the building into an...
Like a blind.
To implode in on its own footprint.
Yeah, which is what this building did, again, which is... I tell you what, if it did just come down from fire, it did it in a very controlled, sensible way. This building wanted to implode on itself. It's very nice. It's very lucky it did that because it could have killed several people.
Which does lead me to believe that it might be controlled. Either that or it was one of the worst construction architectural designs for a building ever.
We kind of argued that in the first video as well, didn't we? That these seem to be very badly designed buildings potentially.
Maybe they are just covering their own arses for the poor design and build of these.
The interesting
buildings.
thing though about this Larry Silverstein comment, this pull it comment, is actually he said he was talking to the fire department commander.
Yeah.
Who since came out and said, no, he wasn't. I didn't speak to him. And he says he didn't speak to him on that day. And if you think about it, why would he? If you're in 9/11, you're the fire department commander, and the owner of one of the buildings phones you, you're going to go, tell him just sod off, I'm busy.
Yeah, I don't think
I don't want to talk to you right now. I've got better things to do. And you know what, mate? I don't care if you're in the building or not. It's not your decision what I do with my firefighters. I will pull them out when it's safe. Do you know what I mean? Why would he be on the phone to Larry Silverstein? You know, so, but like I said, this guy said, which then, that makes it more suspicious to me, though, that Larry Silverstein's then come out and said this stuff.
And if you were using the phrase pull it, to mean pull the firefighters out. You wouldn't say pull it, you'd say pull them. It's
Yeah.
the wrong use of, the wrong grammatical use, isn't it? Or the wrong use of grammar.
Yeah, it's
in
maybe
the
what you
situation.
wouldn't say. Yeah, when he says pull it, he's talking about the building, isn't he?
Yes.
Rather than the people.
Yeah, otherwise you'd say pull those people out. Tremendous loss of life, get them out. But
Yeah.
again, why would
Just
Larry
get 'em out,
Silverstein be involved in that decision or that process in the slightest? It's the fire department's decision, surely.
Whether that's just him later trying to make out he's more important than he is,
Possibly.
or
Yeah.
there's something else going on and he was talking to somebody else. I don't know. They always say that if you tell a lie, make at least some of it true to make it more believable. So maybe it
was someone else he was talking to, not the fire chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they made the decision to pull it. What, you mean the people that had gone in and put all the explosives in, ready to pull it? Maybe that was the conversation he had with them.
And that's what he's then been talking about, and that's what is that, rapper line of truth. I don't know. I found a lot of videos and things saying that a lot of firefighters knew this building was coming down beforehand. They said they reckon they knew it was coming down for hours. They could see Boeing in the building. It was warping from the fires and things.
It didn't come down till 5 o'clock in the evening.
No, it burned for nearly 8 hours.
It burned for like most of the day before it collapsed. Which again is interesting because it gives enough time potentially for people to go in.
Which we'll talk about that in a minute because I do. There's an interesting point I want to make on that one. But I was going to say that we had a comment and somebody I was chatting to through Facebook on one of the videos, and he says he was actually there. Now I can't verify his story obviously, but I do know he's from the area, so I've got no reason to misbelieve him. And he did have really good details about how far they'd run and things like this. But he says that he was volunteering in the area. He was trying to help people out of the buildings and trying to help people that were injured. The firefighters basically told them, he said a few minutes before, but I don't know how literal he was being, and they basically said that nobody knew this building was coming down, and all of a sudden, just before it went, they were all told to run. And they said he ran 2 or 3 streets before, and then the building just collapsed behind him, basically. So these stories of that the firefighters knew this building was coming down for hours.
Although, what's the word for it? I suppose, conversely to that, the media did report, certain media reported its collapse prior to it happening that day.
The BBC had a little bit of a bad day from that respect. They, about half an hour before, I've loved the video, half an hour before, and we have to collect that one of the other buildings, Building 7, has collapsed, and then in the background there's like Building 7 just stood
in
there.
the New York skyline, still standing, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people consider that a smoking gun. They really do consider that yeah. Now I initially, but you actually made the point earlier that maybe the information was sort of being drip fed out. I initially thought if they're sort of like reading a script, it makes no sense. If they're being sent the information, it would make no sense for whoever's planned this to do that, because you're just letting more people know that it's a lie, don't you? But actually, a lot of these media things are run off a line, don't they? There's like Reuters and things like this. They put the information out, and then the different newsrooms just pick that information up. So it might not even be that difficult for somebody centrally to be drip feeding this information out.
True, and with 90% of the Western media controlled by the six major players now, it's it's not that hard when they all go to the same meetings, like the Bilderberg group meetings, to coerce the media into printing your version of events and coordinating them. I think what's most likely to have happened that day is they were supposed to pull the building, or controlled, the building was supposed to have its controlled demolition probably 20 minutes, half an hour earlier than it actually occurred. So it's probably supposed to occur about 4:30, but didn't actually happen until 5 o'clock.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And because
that
of
information was just released to the BBC
information had already been
incorrectly.
released, and then they decided to delay it.
I also think it's possible, and probably more likely in my head, that it was just a mistake. There was much going on.
But hold on, if the building wasn't going to collapse though, and you'd announced it had already collapsed and then it didn't collapse, where did you get that information from?
One of the things, why were they even talking about it? Most people didn't even know there was. They knew there was the Twin Towers. Most people didn't know the World Trade Center complex was like 6 buildings.
Well,
7 buildings. I didn't know that. When they talk about Building 7 collapse, I was like, what are you talking about? What's
Well,
Building...
I did when I started researching into the conspiracy theories behind...
Yeah, exactly, but I didn't at the time.
No,
I don't even remember this happening until I learned about the conspiracy theory years later. I don't even remember this happening at the time.
It's probably because it was brushed over very lightly in the media.
Yeah, nobody cared.
Well, I suppose... Yeah,
Public.
the public
People
didn't really care. But Building 7 has some very interesting tenants as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's built over a power substation.
Yes.
Which, if you're thinking about coordinating an attack and limiting your response, the World Trade Center was built over the water main that exploded before the planes hit somehow, limiting the ability for the fires to be controlled, particularly in Building 7. And then you've got the power substation, which was obviously then destroyed.
Was there any evidence of the power going before?
I don't know, man. I don't know about
that.
But,
I haven't looked into that actually. It'd be interesting to know if the power was still, because if you had loads of trapped people in WTC 1, 2, and maybe 7, the last thing you want is them communicating with the outside world. So you'd want the power to go down as quickly as possible to stop communication with the outside world.
When this went down.
It's
But it's interesting to talk about Building 7 though. Actually, when it was first constructed, it was considered to be a bit of a flop because they couldn't fill it. It was only when the Solomon Brothers, part of this investment bank, which has got shady links, but we'll get into that when we start doing the Follow the Money episodes a little later in the series.
Ties to AIG, perhaps?
There's a few ties that I've seen, but I'm still doing the research. But they're not. They seem slightly dodgy. But they took up a lot of the building before they moved in as tenants. The building was in danger of being like a financial flop. It just wasn't. They couldn't fill it.
Was that why the CIA housed their biggest headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia, in there as well? Then just to utilise
it was one of their
space.
biggest data dumps, wasn't it? I think. But
it's the second biggest CIA place outside of
New York
Langley,
office.
Virginia.
That's interesting. If you're also talking about trying to cripple your ability to respond and cripple intelligence on the day, one of the things you'd want to take out is the Office of Emergency Management for the mayor office in New York. Building 7.
Building 7.
So they all had to retreat to a different place, but this thing had been like reinforced and like bomb-proofed sort of thing.
Oh yeah. The windows could withstand 200 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, also
ridiculous
it was designed to be. It was designed to be self-sufficient, had its own power source, its own thing.
Water supply, everything. Yeah. Which is interesting that would normally be the crisis management place, but it was destroyed. Thus, what's the word? Stopping you from having any real response in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm. And then the US Secret Service had offices there as well, which is again is another organisation that you would want to limit their ability to respond. So.
Oh, and the other thing that we've completely forgotten as well is the 2.3 trillion that went missing on September the 10th, 2001.
I say, I hadn't forgotten about it. We're not talking about it yet.
Yeah, all right, okay.
It's like he doesn't attend the meetings. Yeah, the 2.3 trillion. We're talking about that when we started talking about the money moving, and this is where all the research was for.
And the main computer system that kept records of all this money was in the outer D-ring of the Pentagon, which was hit on September the 11th, and the only backup was in WTC 7.
Yeah. So after September 11, this investigation into $2.3 trillion lost.
Missing
stopped.
from the Pentagon's Department of Defence's budget. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about something else. That hole may have been a little bit bigger since then, but we'll go into that another time.
Just an order of magnitude.
Yeah, it was about 10. So, if we talk about the 9/11 Truth Movement briefly, these 1,400 architects, engineers, things that have got together and said that what happened on September 11 doesn't make any sense. They are particularly adamant that Building 7 doesn't make sense.
And you've got to kind of listen to them when their field of specialism is architecture.
Yeah. Well, we talk about Richard Gage is one of the leaders. We're going to talk about him a bit when we talk about the NIST report and how it might have been tampered with. We've got a demo expert, Danny Jorkins. We've got a physicist, Sammy Jones. We've got a civil engineer, Professor Robert Carroll. He's a slightly interesting fellow, though. He basically got asked to leave his job after he came out and said a lot of things about September 11th and how he believed it was faked. He was a professor at a university, and they sort of said, you should probably retire. So he's an interesting fellow.
Okay.
But you've got this group. I've seen him in a few interviews. Particularly, Richard Gage is very good, and he's not really shouting conspiracy. He's not talking about who did it, why. He just says, from an engineering point of view, the story you're telling us doesn't make sense. And I just want an investigation.
It's not logical. It's not. Yeah.
And somebody that understands this stuff better than me, better than you, is saying this don't make sense. That's got to be a big flag. Particularly when the NIST report, that we'll talk about in a bit, was dodgy, and the Commission report doesn't even mention Building 7.
Yeah, it just completely it fails to acknowledge its existence. Which is exactly what you do when you're running a cover-up, generally.
One thing I would like to talk about is another eyewitness on the day. It's a Barry Jennings. And again,
yes, I remember Barry, yes.
Really fascinating bloke. He reports there were several explosions. He is a firm believer in this building didn't fall down because of fire. He says he heard explosions. I would argue that wouldn't it sound like explosions, though, that the two towers were coming down around him, the debris hitting the building.
I imagine there'd be some loud, high decibel sound from the collapse, but
he says several as well. That's 3. He says several explosions. So I mean, he was talking about that he was saved. He was finally got out of the building about lunch, about 12 o'clock, until he actually finally got out of the building. He was the last one in the building, so he should know. There's reports of him saying he was having to step over dead bodies. That I said, there was these several explosions. He's got a very, very exciting story about how he got out of the building. That parts of the building were collapsing, and he was having to, go down to climb back up, and all sorts of things. I mean, and I've seen him in a few interviews. He seemed really convincing, and again, he wasn't necessarily saying anything. He was just saying what I witnessed doesn't fit what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
and that, and if there's enough eyewitnesses that corroborate that, then it does make you start wondering as to what occurred.
And then in 2008 he died, and there's a little bit of mystery about how he died, but some have said it's possibly leukemia, and I don't know if you said, particularly if I was the family, that a lot of have suggested he was killed because of what he was saying. One of the reasons they point to that is because the family haven't released why he died. But would they? A lot of families would just think that's none of your bloody business.
Well, also, he might have been a lone wolf in his beliefs within his family as well, so they might not really want to get involved in letting the public know what his cause of death was. That didn't matter to them because they didn't believe his conspiracy theory for 9/11. Why would it's just his family, isn't it? They just want to.
It's like we discussed in the last episode, isn't it, about cancer and 9/11, and unfortunately the asbestos in the air and all these other things. Somebody dying within 10 years following this incident of cancer shouldn't really shock us.
No, it probably shouldn't. You're probably right. If there's asbestos in the buildings and those fibres are getting pulled apart by the severe forces of the collapse, you're inhaling those straight into your lungs and lots of it. By the time you get clear of that dust field after the
most definitely
buildings have collapsed.
And I would like to defend him a little bit as well, actually, because he then retracted a part of his statement a few years later in another report, and he retracted the part about stepping over the dead bodies. So then a lot of debunking sites have jumped on that and said, well, he retracted his statement. He didn't. He retracted the bit about stepping over the dead bodies. And the reason why he did was because he didn't retract it because he said it's not true. He said it didn't like how it made me sound. And that's a direct quote. And I can kind of understand that. People were sort of saying, well, why weren't you trying to help them? Why weren't you trying to see what was going on? And it made him sound like he'd done something wrong almost.
Yeah.
So,
although there was probably nothing he could do
in
that situation. If they were already dead, what could he do to help?
But the thing, he could have come out and said, oh, I was confused, and it was, the shock of the event, and maybe I was confused, but he didn't. He just sort of said, I don't like how it made me sound, which is different. He had he had every excuse under the sun to say I might have been wrong about that.
I think selfishness plays very highly into a situation like that. You look after yourself and your loved ones that you're with.
Yeah,
if you're on your own and your loved ones, your family are at home, it's number one.
But also, he's being
you're trying
dragged
to get
out
out of
by
that
firemen.
situation.
There's firemen actually got him arm in arm, escorting him out of the building. So it's a bit different to sort of say, whoa, shouldn't we be doing? You know, you like say he's not in a position to sort of try to help anyone. He's the victim. He's the one being helped. So yeah, no, I don't. I think. But he's a very, like I say, it's really interesting the way he talks about it. And at the end of the day, somebody that was actually there, the last person to be dragged out of the building, is saying this ain't right, and that's huge. You know, whether he was how he interpreted what was going on, maybe he was too close. I don't know, that he couldn't judge what was. You know, sometimes you're too close to a problem, you can't judge what's going on. But when somebody like says and he doesn't believe it, you've got to stop and listen and wonder, haven't you? You know?
I think you have really. Yeah, he's and you don't seem to have too many people that are willing to come forward to give their eyewitness statements from that day. Strangely enough, almost like they've secretly been bought off, not to.
Well, the other thing
stories.
is, I think we're going to have to look in the video on its own, to be honest. But a lot of eyewitnesses seemed to have then died. The one in particular, I can't remember her name. I'm sorry, but we'll do a proper episode on it. She actually appeared on Infowars. She appeared
Alex
on Infowars
Jones.
and Alex Jones, and he was interviewing her and they were talking about this. And Alex Jones asked her, "Are you planning to commit suicide?" She's like, "No, of course not. Why would I commit suicide? I've got everything to live for." And he said, "Are you sure you're not planning to commit suicide?" "No, I'm not planning to commit suicide. I'm also not planning to commit suicide, by the way." And then she literally, like 3 days later, she commits suicide.
Yeah,
she was found hanging by her neck in her living room by I think it was her mum. But I think we'll do a video on that because it's fascinating. There's like 7 or 8 of them that are really interesting. Like I say, Barry Jennings was included in this.
Did she also have three broken bones in her neck like Epstein?
Oh, we should find out, shouldn't we? That'd be interesting. But
probably
she got Epsteined.
Strangulation homicide rather than a suicide.
Yeah,
but
she got suicided.
I love that she got suicided.
I just know how much you hate that term. So.
It's such poor English.
It's a made-up word. I made it up.
I know. But I quite like the phrase. They got suicided. Yeah. It has the right connotations, doesn't it?
Does,
that it wasn't them, that it was somebody else.
Kind of true.
Yeah.
So one of the so there's a few things with this, right? So the stuff we've talked about so far is a bit circumstantial. You can't really. There's a couple of things that nobody disagrees about, though, and one of them is this sulfidized steel thing. And they found evidence of this during the Twin Towers, but they found a lot of it at Building 7. And when this steel there's some sort of chemical reaction, it becomes higher in sulfur, and its melting point is dropped by like 2/3, so it becomes much weaker. Right. And they found pools of it.
Yeah, sulfur does do that. It does lower the melting point.
There's no explanation. And that's not conspiracy theory, that's fact. And there's no explanation for it.
That's why when you make alloys, you try and remove the impurities like sulfur in order to make it a stronger steel. Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things is certain types of thermite are made more powerful by adding sulfur. So is this smoking gun?
Quite possibly.
High levels of sulfur, nobody can explain it. I did watch a video and he said, well, that doesn't mean, that's reverse science. Just because there's high levels of sulfur doesn't mean thermate. And I'm like, yes, but it doesn't mean it's not thermate
either. No, it's just... It's something that's circumstantial or coincidental.
Yeah.
But then when you start ramping these coincidences together...
Yeah.
And then working out the probability of that happening, then that, then that, then that, then that, then that, then that, and that.
And you also add dust that was analysed, and they found these red specks of things that has been analysed as thermate. Now, this evidence was given to the NIST team. They've never said it's not thermate. They've said we're not testing it because we have no custody of evidence.
So
there's no way of judging where it's come from.
That this is.
That's the only reason they haven't tested it.
Okay.
Or they haven't verified or denied it. So they're not denying it. They're just saying there's no custody of evidence. So we can't think.
Anything they conclude is not.
Why wouldn't they get their own samples? And then there would be a custody. of evidence.
Well, again, if you're not that interested in trying to actually produce an official investigation,
prove it. Yeah, we don't want to prove.
We don't want to prove that. We don't want to prove anything. We want it to be as loose and as ambiguous as possible. Then you wouldn't collect any samples. You'd also ship off all the steel really quickly abroad. Oh wait, did they do? Oh, they did that.
Yeah, it was 70%. And one of the things also that's a little bit more contentious, and Richard Gage talks about this a lot, and he talks about when they did the NIST report. One of the things was they never released any of the raw data, so nobody can go and run their computer simulations. Right? So they did all these computer simulations and proved how the building collapsed. Nobody can test that. Nobody can check.
So here's the official theory on how it all happened.
How did you get to that answer?
Oh, I'm not telling you.
Not telling you. Yeah. Go on. No, don't want it. But what they have done is we released certain elements about what heat was in the area and how quickly they put it on. Now, one of the things they couldn't seem to do was get the building to collapse the way they wanted to. So they adjusted the parameters of some of the data. And one of the things they did was they adjusted how quickly the heat got into the steel, how quickly the heat was absorbed into the steel to create the distorting they needed to see.
Right.
So what they did was they put the heat on instantly. Instead of allowing it to build and shrink and thing, they added the heat and they took it away. And then the steel twisted like
they basically made the structure of the building a superconductor.
Apparently, and then
but
then when they did that though, the building collapsed just like they wanted it to. So, hey.
But they won't release their data on their theory, and
they won't release any of the raw data.
When any scientific organisation won't release the data on their theory, the theory's probably bollocks.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Well, one of the things about science is peer review.
Peer review and.
That's the most important
proving
thing. Peer
hypothesis
review.
Through experimentation.
There's no peer review on these computer simulations. None. So how do we know what it is?
Then NIST could have just made it all up, which I suspect is probably quite likely, and they're probably paid off quite handsomely to do so.
So one of the things, though, that the NIST were asked about thermate, right? So they said, well, okay, how much would it take to demolish this building? And they basically said all the columns would need to be wired up, and it would require about £100 of thermate per column to destroy the building. Right? So this is where I call on this. Their own NIST report shows exactly how they would have done this, because there was one column. This building, by their own report, one column collapsed, which pulled the rest of the building down. Right? So you don't need to wire up the entire building.
You need £100 of thermate per column, even though it collapsed from one column.
So their own report says, actually, all you need to do is put £100 of thermate on one column.
In the centre, the central column of building 7.
You take that column away, the whole building falls down exactly how you want it to. So that's their report. That's not me saying that. That's their report that says that's how this building collapsed. So in that case, what are we talking about?
If all the horizontal steel girders went, the only way that could be possible is if every single horizontal girder went through the central vertical steel girder, so that when that went, it lost everything, and literally the walls just pulled inwards.
But what they're basically saying, this building had an Achilles heel. That's what the NIST report was basically saying. There's an Achilles heel in this building. If that's true. And whoever knew it's true, then NIST are telling you how they did it. They took out one column.
That might very well be, actually, yeah.
Fell down.
Maybe it's more. Maybe it's actually more accurate than we're giving it credit for.
Maybe they didn't actually need to do all that much study. The guys that planned it just said, "No, I just need that one column." It was this one. So we mentioned earlier then why the building burned for 7 hours. And we've talked about this. We're going to do the Follow the Money episodes very shortly. And one of the things is that there was evidence within this building that needed to disappear. Right? So, and now I've had to think about this. Would you... I think there's two possibilities, right? You either make the building collapse straight away. maybe one of the towers wasn't supposed to fall straight down. Maybe it was supposed to sort of fall onto building 7. I don't know, but
Possibly, but you never know that.
But from my point of view, if I've got evidence and I absolutely it has to disappear, there can be no mistakes. You don't knock that building down straight away. You have fires, you get everyone out, you go in there with a team, you destroy the evidence. You remove any evidence you
Well,
don't
I don't think
use.
they probably even needed to go in with the team. I imagine the CIA with the team that we used to destroy all
That's
the
what
evidence.
I mean. Whoever. Somebody goes, actually, yeah, you're right, the CIA are there, the team's probably already there, sat in their offices at the desks, the emergency lights come on, you go, come on then, boys.
Come on, let's go put in that paperwork. Destroy those
Just shred
computers.
this like crazy.
No, they just came around with petrol and a light, probably.
Yeah, exactly. But that's my point, though, isn't it? You don't knock the building down straight away. You make sure the evidence is gone first, because what you don't want is that the building to collapse, and then, or not collapse quite right, or don't think, and then somebody to actually be, and somebody.
Oh look,
then
this file
finds
cabinet's
the bloody
this
evidence.
file cabinet's relatively intact. What's in here?
Yeah.
Oh, CIA plan for the
all that-
demolition of Building 7. What?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, all this proves where all that 2 trillion went. Oh, that's excellent. It's lucky that survived. No,
Yeah.
you make sure that is gone, and then you demolish the building.
I'll get on a train and get this to the Pentagon straight away.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
Because nothing ever goes missing on trains with government officials.
so.
Yeah.
You know what I was saying to you about when I have a good conspiracy theories. There's the why. This is the easiest.
Yeah.
If they did this because they needed that evidence gone, and they needed it gone forever,
And
then
there's
the
probably
collapse covers up the crime.
Yeah, totally. But also, if you think about the crisis management centre that was in there as well,
Mm-hmm.
that
Oh, it's
the mayor-
lining the
there's-
ducks up in it. It's
there's
like
just
I mean,
literally, you are killing several birds with one stone by destroying that building, aren't
yeah,
you?
most definitely.
You really are. Yeah.
If we're going to argue, when we do start getting into the money though, if we're going to argue this was the main reason for the attack, it was actually, it's almost like the Twin Towers, even though we're going to say that the Twin Towers, there was stuff going on in the Twin Towers that they wanted to quiet as well. But actually, have you ever seen like one of those murder mystery things and they'll murder 2 or 3 people,
Yes.
but it's really only the one person they were after. It's almost like in this thing, actually it's Building 7 they were after.
Yes. So I actually believe that's probably more correct. The whole of the collapse of building WTC 1 and 2 and the planes flying into them is a massive distraction tactic from the 2.3 trillion that went missing the day before, and then all records of that was then destroyed the day after.
No, and I don't mean to
That's-
sound disrespectful about, because I did the loss of life and everything was horrific, and I don't want to downplay that. But at the same time, this is how these kind of people think. You know,
But these elite people that see the rest of the world as their subjects, we're ants to some of these the most powerful people in the world. I really do think probably a lot of them have a superiority complex, and they don't even view us as fellow human beings.
Yeah.
So killing 3,000-4,000 people in New
nothing.
York is nothing. Not when you're the same guys that are probably in charge of running the military-industrial complex and have been involved in every major war that America's been involved in and every minor war for the last 70 years and killed millions.
Yeah.
Why do you care about 3,000-4,000 people?
But the thing that really scares me, and I'll say we'll get into this again later in the video, but the thing that scares me is I generally don't think these people think they're the bad guy. They think this is maybe a necessary evil.
Yes.
This attack that they planned, orchestrated and implemented was a necessary evil to get to where they wanted to go, to get to that thing. So I generally think they consider themselves patriots.
They probably do, and I imagine if you asked them to justify themselves, they would have the words to attempt to try and justify themselves. We'd see them as psychopaths. However, they would feel justified in their means, probably, because when you've got more money than you could ever spend, what's left?
I feel
Controlling
about
people.
Jack Nicholson at the end of A Few Good Men. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. And that's kind of how these guys think. They're the necessary evil. They're making the decisions you don't want to make, you can't make, to protect us all. You know, and that's I genuinely fear that's how these people think. And if ever it came out that 9/11 was planned, and these people were arrested, they would probably say, yeah, but I did it for the greater good.
It'll never come out within the lifetimes of the people involved. That's why the Official Secrets Act is 50 years standard, extended to 75 at the President's request, specifically because it's a human lifespan. So you can never get prosecuted for your war crimes.
This will never be proven categorically.
No,
because
but
any evidence that exists is gone.
But
Any whistleblowers will disappear.
Yeah, exactly. But I could see perhaps 75 years, in 2076, they might release. I mean, look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there was a document, wasn't there, that's been released now from after 50 years, Northwood, from 1953, that basically said we'll take passenger planes, and we'll fly them into American landmarks, make it look as though it's the Cubans that have done it, and then we'll invade and occupy Cuba.
Yeah. If you go back and look at our false flag video, we go through all that.
Yeah, we do.
I'll put the link up there. It'll be cha-ching. Now I've got to do a horrible editing thing where I actually have to remember that this is and put that in the right place. Yeah, I make my life so hard. So after all that we've discussed, Building 7 fell down from fires or demolished.
Controlled demolition. It does the classic pinch, drop as the floors are blown out. You can actually almost see on Building 7 the pops from the explosion. Pink, pop, pop, which is less apparent with buildings 1 or 2. But I think Building 7 also scientifically gets far closer to freefall speed than buildings 1 or 2
it
did
collapses
as well.
at virtually freefall speed.
It's like 90-something% freefall speed through the path of greatest resistance. So
there's no reason why that entire building collapsed in my mind. It should have collapsed a portion of it. I can totally understand a portion of it collapsing around this atrium area where there's an atrium and then a penthouse above it. Okay, the entire building coming down, and like I said, I actually genuinely think. I don't like the idea of them taking in tons of thermate and wiring it all up and doing the construction, even though there was 8 or 9 months of work on the elevators on Building 7 beforehand, so they would have had the opportunity to take.
So again, they were like the fireproofing upgrades in buildings 1 and 2 as well,
exactly. They had the opportunity. There was possibilities. Anybody that says, "Oh, could you snuck it in past security as well?" The security were probably in on it. They were probably just told to stay in their offices or whatever. But also, they would have just done it as well. The workmen were coming in and out. It's not that difficult. But I do wonder, like I says, if the NIST report tells us exactly how this was done, and that they packed and they destroyed one column, knowing that was an Achilles heel of the building, and the whole damn thing collapsed. They might not have even expecting the whole thing to collapse. They might have only expected a partial collapse, maybe. I wonder about this with the Twin Towers as well. It's just like the guys that planned it, whether were they actually expecting them to collapse, or they were just expecting enough damage to get away with what they were trying to get away with. And then when it collapsed, they sat there going, "Oh crap, that went better than expected, didn't it? Nice one, boys." But I'm with you on this. I think controlled demolition. I think with everything that goes on, I think there are a lot of red herrings. I don't think that necessarily the BBC report saying about the 30 minutes before is this big smoking gun that a lot of people think. I think that could have just easily been a mistake. But the problem is when you add it to all the other mistakes, then
there's too many coincidences. The probability goes again into the astronomical numbers that they're all coinciding at the exact same day. No.
But I think the Larry Silverstein thing about pull it, I don't think that maybe we shouldn't be focusing too much on that. And this seems to me a man that just seems to be trying to make himself. But again, you add it then to the BBC thing, and I totally follow that it's one more.
And it's a standard demolition term. The building looked like a controlled demolition when you watch the video replay of it. It
adds up.
It all adds up, yeah.
I just don't think it's that we should be focusing on that. I think what we should be focusing on is these architects and these other people that say, we need this investigating because this doesn't make sense. These people are actually experts, know what they're talking about. So this doesn't make sense.
In the construction and possibly even the demolition of buildings, exactly. If they're demolitions experts.
This sulfidized steel thing, which nobody argues. We need to know how did this NIST report go into it and not come up with an explanation for that? How? It's obviously a massive issue.
Yeah.
This sulfidized weak steel. If nothing else, even if there was no terror attack, there was no demolition, there was no any of this, at bare minimum, what the hell was this weak steel doing in our skyrise? Is it in any other skyrises? And nobody's asking. How many other skyrises can just have a fire and just fall from the sky because there's weak steel for some reason, and nobody's ever bothered to figure it out? We should be looking into that. You know? I've
never liked the idea of living in a high rise in a big city. I don't know why. I've just never I've never thought, oh yeah, I've always thought, oh, stay away from that. I don't know why. Just
I
something
don't like
about.
I get claustrophobic and tall things. Like we.
I mean, you must get
cities are
some
nice
great
places
views,
to visit, but yeah, nice place to visit. Wouldn't want to live there.
I mean, don't
I
get,
like trees and things. Or something.
don't get me wrong. With knowing our planet and its cataclysmic nature, I'd quite like to live several hundred feet above sea level, but on terra firma in a single or double-story house, preferably.
Yeah, if a meteor or something hits, like something like the Tunguska event hit a city, though, that's that city gone. I don't want to be there.
Oh no,
I also have that
leveled.
many people trying to get out at the same time as well. Yeah, no, thank you.
But
I've visited
2,000 square miles, something like that, of flattened trees.
Yeah.
It was or 20,000 square miles. It was a lot, I'm sure.
2,000 square miles.
Was
Yeah.
it 2,000? Was it?
I think. But we had this. But saying all that, New York is literally my favourite place on earth, and I can't wait to go back. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's an
It's a good
amazing
city.
city. All right then. So that's it. That's Building 7. Right now, if we're pretty convinced about Building 7, we're doing the Pentagon next. The Pentagon, right? We may as well just do it now.
No.
It would take us about 5 minutes. There's 2 or 3 things with the Pentagon that are just BS, but we're going to get onto that. So thank you very much, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week. Like and
Thank you.
subscribe.